the Spinster Life Podcast.
It's been raining in LA.
I know, again, continuously. My dogs don't like it, not one goddamn bit.
Rilo hates the rain so much that he won't even go outside to pee during the rains.
Piper did that this time around. Sophie, the blind scaredy dog, went out in the rain, no problem, peed, came right back in, seemed unfazed, and Piper was like, "Oh wait, I'll hold it." It's like outside was like a bar bathroom.
That being said, he's a boy. He can just lift his leg. It's not Piper has to squat. It's so much, again, females suffer.
She lifts her leg. She lifts her leg.
She does?
Yeah, she does.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
She's evolved.
Yeah, she's a leg lifter.
She's like, why would I get my hoo-ha so close to the ground? That's gross.
Guess she wouldn't. She would just,
she's
she
not
would just
wrong.
hike her leg. Because she's a boss.
I am ashamed to say that even though it was raining, it wasn't raining loud enough, so I still had to turn on my rain app. I had to add some thunder and some lightning crashes in there. It's just, the natural thing doesn't do it for you anymore. It's essentially my equivalent of having a porn addiction. I have a natural sounds addiction. And the real thing doesn't do it for me anymore.
And you're just going to keep having to get more and more extreme sounds.
It's going to be a tsunami. It's going to be hurricane force winds.
You have a problem, Eva. We'll get you help. Don't worry.
Yeah, but it is nice when it rains in LA. It smells fresh for 4 hours.
Yeah.
And I have grass in my backyard and my front yard that'll only stick around for the next couple months, and it'll go back to looking like a wasteland.
Yeah,
out of the Gobi Desert.
You're not wasting water on watering the grass.
No.
You're not Tom Selleck.
Issue with that. What did Tom Selleck do?
During the drought, when there were really severe water restrictions on watering your lawn, he wasted so much water. He was watering his massive lawn in Malibu or wherever the fuck he lives. And he got fined because, he was the top water user in LA during a drought.
I read that within less than 10 years, India is going to be using 80% of its available water supply every single year. They're running out of water.
Like they did in South Africa.
Oh, did they run out of water in South Africa?
A couple years ago, there was a drought there, and people had to line up for water. You couldn't use your toilet. You got a jug. You had to stand in line, and you got a jug of water.
Oh my God. Yeah, so India, and the second place was, in the Middle East around the Euphrates River. It's also just drying up. Essentially, it's looking like the LA River, which is only a river one day a year. What the water wars are coming.
And that's a good segue actually into Octavia, because she did predict a lot of the current predicaments that we're in politically, climate-wise.
In addition to her insane work ethic / devotion to her craft / discipline, you're writing about these things that are not happy things. These are things that are literally existentially devastating. How did she not get super depressed? How is she writing about tyrants and dictators and climate issues and all these things that are just, it's crazy.
That she didn't get depressed? Yeah, I guess I never thought of it that way, because, she's out there doing her thing. She's writing. She is introducing these big ideas.
Maybe I'm projecting. Just maybe.
I don't think I could write about that stuff either and not want to jump off a cliff.
Coming from Pasadena, it's odd to me that because Pasadena is so gorgeous, it's just odd to me that she came up with all this really dark shit when she's living in this pseudo utopia.
She didn't write romance novels where there's always a happy ending. She wrote commentary. She wrote analysis. She wrote about real shit. She wasn't writing about, Amish love over the butter churn.
So let's get into it. I find her so interesting.
I think we could learn a lot from her. So let's learn a little bit more about her.
Let's do it.
This spinster wrote visionary stories that are eerily prescient. In fact, she originated the slogan, "Make America Great Again." A visionary whose work predicted the current political and environmental climate, a shy hermit who captured the human condition through characters from another planet, a dedicated writer who worked tirelessly to perfect her craft. Our spinster this month is renowned science fiction author Octavia E. Butler. Octavia Estelle Butler was born in Pasadena, California on June 22, 1947. She's on the cusp of Gemini Cancer, the cusp of magic as it is sometimes called. She was the only child of Larice and Octavia Margaret Guy Butler. Octavia Sr. was a maid in the households of upper-class families in Pasadena, and Larice was a shoeshine man who unfortunately died when Octavia Jr. was just 7 years old. From then on, Octavia Jr., or Junie, short for Junior, was raised by her mother and maternal grandmother. Octavia Sr. would take books the family she worked for were going to throw out and took them home for Junie to read. School was difficult for Octavia. She was shy, teased by her classmates about her appearance. She was 6 feet tall by the time she was a teenager, while teachers assumed she was slow because of her shyness and because Octavia also had mild dyslexia. The library was one of Octavia's refuges. She started reading fairy tales and horse stories, eventually discovering science fiction. She wasn't content just to read. At the age of 10, she asked her mother for a typewriter, which she received. Pasadena played a part in shaping Octavia's outlook on life, race, and status. In her lifetime, she saw Pasadena become both a more diverse place and a more conservative, racist place. The black population of the city increased, but red line policies kept the city segregated. Octavia's first step into secondary education was her associate's degree at Pasadena City College. You might have an image of community college as an inferior place to get an education, but PCC is one of the best community colleges in the country. And it gave Octavia a place to express her talent. She won a college-wide writing contest and won $15. College also exposed her to the Black Power movement. The Clarion Workshop is a 6-week workshop for science fiction writers. Not just a workshop, the workshop for aspiring science fiction writers. And in 1970, Octavia attended. Octavia once said of workshops, quote, "A workshop is a way of renting an audience and making sure you're communicating what you think you're communicating. It's so easy as a young writer to think you've been very clear when in fact you haven't." End quote. Octavia Sr. had always been supportive of Octavia, getting her reading material, buying her a typewriter, and as Octavia's writing talents grew, Octavia Sr. continued her support. She paid for Octavia to attend the Clarion Workshop and to have an agent review Octavia's work. Octavia spent the next decade of her life dedicating herself to her writing. She took mindless menial jobs, including washing dishes, telemarketing, and as a potato chip inspector. This schedule allowed her to conserve her creative energy for her writing. Every morning, she would get up at 3 a.m. to write. What about the work itself? I think Octavia would frown at any discussion of her life that didn't include her life's passion, her writing. She was a straightforward writer. She was much more concerned with being clear with her words and writing stories that made people think hard and feel deeply than with a clever turn of phrase. She faced rejection, but kept working. Not being a writer just wasn't an option for her. In an interview, she once said, quote, "I could either be a writer or I could die really young," end quote. So, she kept inspecting potato chips until the publication of her first novel in 1976, Pattern Master. It was the first in a 6-novel series called the Patternist series. With the publication of her standalone novel Kindred in 1979, she was finally able to support herself full-time with her writing. Octavia once said of science fiction, quote, "I was attracted to science fiction because it was so wide open. I was able to do anything, and there were no walls to hem you in. There was no human condition that you were stopped from examining," end quote. She's most associated with the genre science fiction, but I think her work transcends that label. Her work is speculative fiction, writing about a world that could be, or a world that's coming. Her work approached race, class, and gender thoughtfully. Octavia is credited as one of the first writers working in the genre Afrofuturism, a celebration of Black culture that looks towards the future and examines the intersection of race and technology. There are many scholars that can address the full, deeper meaning of her work. We'll link to some of those scholars in the show notes below so you can continue learning about Octavia's work. Her protagonists were often minority outsiders who could adapt and thrive and often form new societies. Her novel Parable of the Sower parallels our current reality. I'm going to read this article. It sums up the plot of the book better than I ever could. This article was in the New Yorker, and it is by Abby Aguirre. Octavia Butler's 10th novel, Parable of the Sower, which was published in 1993, opens in Los Angeles in 2024. Global warming has brought drought and rising seawater. The middle class and working poor live in gated neighborhoods where they fend off the homeless with guns and walls. Fresh water is scarce, as valuable as money. Pharmaceutical companies have created smart drugs which boost mental performance. And pyro, a pill that gives those who take it sexual pleasure from arson. Fires are common. Police services are expensive, though few people trust the police. Public schools are being privatized, as are whole towns. In this atmosphere, a presidential candidate named Christopher Donner is elected based on his promises to dismantle government programs and bring back jobs. So that's the end of the article. And just to be clear, Christopher Donner is the candidate that uses the campaign slogan, Make America Great Again, and also uses the media heavily in his campaign. Octavia won numerous awards, including the Hugo, the Nebula, and she was the first science fiction writer ever to win a MacArthur Genius Grant. Despite the critical acclaim and financial success of her work, writer's block and depression plagued Octavia the last years of her life. She died of what was most likely a stroke at the age of 58. She was far too young when she died, but her legacy lives on through scholarships in her name, including a full scholarship for a writer of color to attend the Clarion Workshop. If you're ever in LA, you can visit the Octavia Lab at the Los Angeles Public Library. There you can access technology like 3D printers, laser cutters, and green screens. Most notably, she donated her notes to the Huntington Library in the Pasadena area. Her notes are among the most accessed materials in the library. Her amazing notes show her passion, dedication, and confidence in her writing. They also offer advice for anyone who wants to start writing, and general life advice. In this quote, Octavia perfectly sums herself up. I'm comfortably asocial, a hermit in the middle of a large city, a pessimist if I'm not careful, a feminist, a black, a former Baptist, an oil and water combination of ambition, laziness, insecurity, certainty, and drive. That's our Spinster of the month, Octavia E. Butler.
An oil and water combination of ambition, laziness, insecurity, certainty, and drive. I relate to this so much. I used to have more of the former when I was younger, the ambition and the insecurity. And now, as I get older, I'm definitely lazier, but have a little more certainty about things. But it's just, she knows herself well. And I think to be a great writer, you really have to know and understand yourself, So
I think she can understand herself because she was an only child. I can relate to that. I'm an only child. You have a lot of time to yourself.
Yeah, and her being a hermit too.
Right, exactly.
You're someone who's very comfortable being by yourself for long periods of time.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Maybe not even comfortable. Maybe like who revels.
Yes, that is the word. I do. I revel in being alone. And I'm sure Octavia did too.
Even though, she had her mother and her grandma around, these are hardworking women and they're probably working a lot. If you're a housekeeper or something, you work very long hours,
Right. She's not putting in 9 to 5. She's working overtime. She's probably working from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Yeah, exactly. So she probably had a lot of time to herself. And so on top of being an only child, she doesn't have adults around her all that much either. She's just kind of left to her own devices, probably had to grow up fast and be responsible at a very young age.
She's a latchkey kid. She's probably one of the original latchkey kids.
Oh, for sure. She's growing up in the 50s and the 60s. Pasadena has always been a relatively very safe community, That's also the time when kids just wandered around by themselves and walked themselves to school and walked themselves to the library. I wonder where in Pasadena she lived. I'm going to be interested I'm going to dig into that a little later. Pasadena is kind of interesting in that it is a little segregated.
That is really interesting because there was some mention of redlining. So those policies that kept people of color from buying homes in white neighborhoods. So it is interesting that you can still see the effects of redlining.
But it's so interesting that Octavia is coming out of here and she's coming from a different part of Pasadena life, right? The amount of wealth that she was growing up around but was not a part of is crazy. Pasadena is really one of the most well-funded cities. And the Pasadena Public Library, which is not, again, a massive city, is grand as hell. It's columns and it's Spanish tile on the roof. It is gorgeous. So that's also very interesting, that she got to experience that. To grow up in a city like Pasadena where she had access to this type of library is just incredible. I have a lot of love in my heart for Pasadena. It's also just one of those places where if you didn't grow up with money and then you're exposed to it, you're oh, is this how the other side lives? You know, like every hedge is perfectly trimmed. It's not like walking in LA where you're going to like be walking your dog and trip over like the huge crevasse in the sidewalk and break your face. Like everything is perfect there. Like it's so nice. So it's just really interesting that that's where she's from. You know, you don't think like Black female sci-fi writer when you think Pasadena. You know, you think old men wearing bow tie, like novelty silk bow ties when you think Pasadena.
Right. And I think that she found that out later in life, that she felt like she didn't belong there when she was growing up there. And then she moved to LA and she was like, oh, this isn't as great. And then she did move back to Pasadena or near Pasadena somewhere. Yeah. She was like, okay, I belong here. Like I do belong here. This is my home.
Also, I'm just rambling about Pasadena because I love it and I want to move back.
Well, your house there was nice. I left your house there.
Yeah. It was a great little house.
You lived in Pasadena for, 3 years?
Well, like 5 years.
Like 5 years? Was it? Oh my God.
Yeah, it was. It just has a taste level that's also very different than a lot of other places that I've been in Southern California. It is very old school in that it still kind of has like a 50s feel. It's a family community. People care a lot about, I think, a different kind of keeping up with the Joneses. You know what I mean?
Like the competitiveness isn't in like the things that you currently have. It's like, how far does your money go back?
It is. That's a good point. It's very much so more of an old money place. It's old Spanish tile and it's columns and it's expertly placed palm trees and tropical plants and it's very green and very lush. It's just got a different feel to it. It's a very specific kind of place, you know. So yeah, I did live there for like 5 years. And I'll move back there as soon as I sell 5 or 7 screenplays for $2 million a piece.
And I'm glad that Octavia's notes stayed in that area because she donated them to the Huntington Library.
Yeah, I mean, she's still part of Pasadena, and I think that's important. You know, for her to remain in Pasadena or even return to Pasadena and to give her all of her notes and her writings into the Huntington Library. You know, it's kind of like she was making sure that she's remained part of its history.
Octavia came from this very beautiful, idyllic place, but she ended up writing about dystopian nightmare scenarios. Let's talk a little bit more about that, because there's some crazy shit that she, I don't think she set out to predict it, but she did predict it.
I mean, this MAGA stuff, this Make America Great Again stuff, it's like jaw-dropping to me. And it's crazy to me that this hasn't been a documentary on Netflix yet. Like, I really don't think it can just be coincidental that she kind of predicted this through her writing and coined this term, Make America Great Again. And then, like, Trump just pulls it out of the ether. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. Like,
and he happens to be that exact same kind of politician as the character in the book. Like, he uses the media in order to launch his campaign. He's not about substance. He's just about the style of presenting it through the media, which is totally Trump.
It almost feels like someone, I'm sure it was not him, himself, but that someone in his circle essentially looked at this and was like, here's a good playbook. It can't be just a random coincidence. There's no way.
It was stolen from her. This idea was lifted from her.
It's interesting because like we're talking the 90s, you know, like Trump in the 80s and the 90s was like the guy. So I wonder if she ever thought.
I mean, did you ever think that he wasn't gross? Like, I mean, I always thought he was gross.
Yeah, but people who were older than us, who are like our parents' age, they had a very different experience of Trump. I feel like our generation and people younger than us, we're more like, oh, there was this old guy and then he got this show on NBC called The Apprentice. But like the people who are like generations older than us, they knew him as the money guy, the real estate guy of New York. I wonder if in her head she ever like made that connection, that either just the type of person she wrote about would be like a Donald Trump figure, or if she literally was like, it could be Donald Trump. He's always been a media guy. Like, he is the king of self-promotion. This is a man who wanted to be famous. He didn't want to just be rich, like he wanted to be known. He was someone who she would have seen fairly often, in the media and in the press when, she was going about, writing and kind of having this idea. So I know I'm just like kind of imagining, what her experience of him was, but they're in the same world, like they're living in the same world at the same time. And she's writing about this stuff, and it's just like, I mean, it would just be all the more crazy if the person that she kind of was envisioning when she was writing this book was, either Trump or someone who was just like him.
I'm trying to think, like, who else this could possibly be that she would have modeled this character off. If she did model this character off someone from real life, and she just, didn't in her own brain say, oh, like the media is one day going to be just idiots tweeting at each other. I don't know if she sort of foresaw the way that media was going, and if it was changing even when she was researching and writing this book. She would have seen Trump use the media to just be flat out racist. He took out that large ad in the New York Times against the 5 young black teenagers who were accused of beating a woman. And then it turned out that
the Central Park
it was
5?
One white dude. The Central Park 5. Thank you. Yes. Yeah. He took out a full page ad that said that they should get the death penalty because they were animals and monsters. So she's seeing this racism play out, and she definitely, racism was a big part of the things that she addressed in her writing.
Just to bring up again that she's living in Pasadena, a city that even today is super white. She's writing about class divides, which just like she's living that day to day. I feel like she's an example of how you can look at how all of these different things come into play in one's life. Your location, your upbringing, your race, your gender, your sex, what you're experiencing through media and through, just like the times that you happen to be alive in, and how that all contributes to what she's writing about, what she's interested in.
We haven't read a lot of her work because we're not sci-fi readers. I'm going to catch up on these books because she's a very good writer.
I'm going to pick up at least one and give it a shot. I am not a sci-fi person. That being said, I mean, Margaret Atwood, like I'm a big Margaret Atwood fan. I mean, most of her stuff is not dystopian, but like Handmaid's Tale happens to be. So, I mean, I think it's also about opening up what I'm consuming, and like also like she's a black female writer who was heavily
she was like leading this male dominated space,
right? Exactly. And it's just like knowing more about her as a person makes me more interested in reading her, and I think we can all read more black women. We can all read more women of color, it's like,
absolutely.
For anyone who's listening out there, like pick up a book of Octavia's.
See how she deals with class and gender and all of these kind of hierarchical ways that society functions. Because she addressed all of them at some point in her writing.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a point of view that needs to be heard. She's someone I can learn from. She's someone that I can read and have a new perspective, which is especially like coming from a fiction standpoint. A lot of the time I feel for myself when I'm trying to read things that give a different perspective, a lot of the time they're nonfiction. Fiction really gives you a chance, I think, to kind of click in a way that you can't with something that's nonfiction, because you're able, obviously, it's like your imagination kind of gets in the way of everything where you're saying, oh, I can't relate to this because this isn't my experience. Instead, you're able to really get there a little faster and a little deeper because, you're dealing in a fictional world.
I think that's what's so brilliant about her writing is that it works on so many levels. Like she's just a good writer who tells a good story. So even if you're not reading into the themes in her work, you still get something out of it. You're still living this really heartfelt story along with her, but you can dive deeper and you can explore all of, the meaning behind her work.
So you read Kindred.
I read Kindred, yeah.
What was your experience there?
Kindred is a hard read, I'm not going to lie, because there's so much horrific violence. The story was really compelling. This one is about a woman who travels back in time to 1830s in the South on a plantation, and she has to keep saving one of her distant ancestors. She is coming from a world where she is free. She's married to a white man, so she's thrust into this world where her race is now a liability. She can't control when she's traveling through time. It just seems to be controlled by emotion more than anything. So she's often stuck. There's a couple passages where she's stuck like a year, 6 months, a year. She's stuck for a really long time. And she can't get out because she can't escape because she's a black person. She would be identified as a slave. There would be people that were out looking for any black people that were unaccompanied on any road. Like, she couldn't get out of this situation except for time traveling. And she has to live through all of, like what it was like to be a slave, and it was brutal. She doesn't shy away from the brutality of it.
I actually find that like horrifying in a good way, because I feel that what that's saying is, how can I get into the head of my female ancestors and what it was really like? Like, how do I go back to the worst nightmare that I could go back to? I mean, that's really courageous. You know how certain actors, they really get intensely into their roles, these method actors who just become whatever it is, and it kind of like destroys their psyche, you know what I mean? Because you're going so deeply into this character, and I think for a writer to really write character well, they have to go into that character, and so for a black woman in 1978 to like go back into being a slave and be, like seeing herself in this character, like that isn't something that's like you wake up every morning and like, oh, it would be pleasant to do today. Like, I'll just go back to this horrific time and kind of see what would it be like if I was stuck. I mean, that's suffering. Like, that is really suffering for your work, so she could give it perspective and write about it in a way that like people could really see the violence, see the suffering, see the lack of power, to not have the autonomy over one's life. That's ballsy.
She is just a good writer. It doesn't matter what genre you like. If you like reading thoughtful stories, you will probably enjoy reading Octavia's work. And I think the biggest thing with her writing was her discipline. And What's that? Something, right? Yep, I had this similar question. Like,
I have none of that.
How do you... She, like, the ass in the chair thing, she just put her ass in the chair every morning and did it. She just wrote. It didn't matter how she felt. Did she feel like it? Probably not some mornings, but did she do it? Yes.
I just bought a milk frother on Amazon because I have convinced myself that if I make my own latte at home in the morning, that I will put my ass in the chair and I will write. I'm pretty sure Amazon has made about $5 million off of me and my false beliefs. There's something that can make me do it. That is not just doing it.
Yeah,
but
same.
We'll see. Maybe my milk frother will save me.
I don't know how much money I've spent. I had a co-working space for a while, and I was like, this is the secret to my productivity, is to go somewhere else to write. This is the secret.
Hey, don't knock it, though. The one thing COVID has taken away from me that I miss more than everything is going to my coffee shop, where I can go and I can plug in my computer and I can work and write and, feel like I was productive. I really do miss that.
Yeah,
that's a bummer.
I didn't do it that often, but I miss having the option. I think we all could learn something from Octavia. We haven't even talked about the potato chip inspector job yet, have we?
Oh, no.
I love this about her.
You know how you hear sometimes like, oh, if you want to be a writer, like you should just get some like mindless job where you're something where you can just leave your job at your job when you go home, or something that doesn't take every ounce of like your mental, spiritual, and physical energy out of you.
Yeah, it doesn't take the creative part of your brain. It takes maybe other kinds of energy from you, but you still have at least like that creative energy left to create. You're not using it to make work for other people.
But like potato chip inspector, like that's got to be like, that's pretty high on that list.
Yeah.
of options. That's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't even know it was a job.
But Amy, who would inspect the potato chips? You know what? Oh my God, my ass would get so much fatter if I was a potato chip inspector, because I would just be like, this one's bad, crunch. This one's bad, crunch.
You'd be like Lucy on the chocolate line with Ethel. You'd be stuffing potato chips down your bra and in your hats and.
Oh, completely. I mean, who wants to waste a potato chip? I mean,
right? I think Octavia was fine wasting the potato chip because she was just like, when can I get back to work though?
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. She died kind of early though, right? Like she died kind of young.
She did die pretty young. She's only 58 when she died. And it wasn't, it maybe didn't need to happen. Like she wasn't terminally ill. She just was taking some medication. It might have caused a stroke. I don't know if that's, like her official cause of death, but she died. She died way too young.
But to have accomplished what she did, I mean,
yeah.
By the age of 58, for being, and I say this for being just because of like the obstacles that were in her way systemically, like for being a woman of color, she just did it.
Yeah. Even if she had that self-doubt, it didn't hold her back. And we haven't discussed her notes either, because her notes are amazing. They are not wishy-washy at all. They are just like, you will be a bestseller. This is what you will do.
I feel like when the Huntington reopens, we need to take a field trip.
Yes, we
need
do.
To go and look at them.
Ooh.
Because one, the Huntington is amazing. Yes. And it just makes me feel like I'm Alice in Wonderland. But also just to, I mean, I'm such like a writer nerd that I feel like going and seeing these, it'll like unlock something in my brain. I mean, I'm sure it won't, but at the same time, I kind of just like, okay, like she got it done. So it's kind of like, what is she saying to herself, Yeah.
It'll at least be a pleasant afternoon.
Yeah, exactly.
And I love that exhibit was like, or her notes are the most accessed things in the library. I love that too.
That's so cool.
Is it people like us that are going and they're like, yeah, I need this because I need to start writing. Let me see them. Let me see the notes. We could make a whole day. We could make a whole Octavia day. We could go to the Octavia lab at the Los Angeles Public Library in the branch that you love. And then we could go to the Huntington Library and we could look at Octavia's note.
And have tea. I think they have like tea there.
Yes.
Yeah. And before that, I will try to find out where in Pasadena she lived because also just like driving around Pasadena is life. It's amazing. Yeah. We will make a date out of it.
Yeah. I love it. Can't wait. I mean, obviously you can't wait until the COVID thing is over, but
Can't wait, but I will.
But also because I want to do a thing.
I am at that stage where I just want to get out of the house.
Yes.
And I'm not that person. Like I am completely comfortable not getting out of the house, but I'm at that stage where I'm like, I just want to do something, anything. I don't care.
Yes. Even a hermit like me. And I do want to discuss the hermity spinsterness of it all, because it is much harder to be a hermit when you are in a relationship. You have like barbecues and shit to go to. You have social engagements. You've got their family. You've got your family. But, if you're a spinster, that's one half of the equation that you don't have to deal with. And you can just hermit and write.
You can just hermit and write. I think.
Hermit and write.
You could find another hermit, but then I think by default, you're no longer a hermit.
Yeah.
It takes a certain type of person to be able to do that. You know what I mean? To be fulfilled in your life by being alone and by, hermit crabbing your life. We're both introverts at heart. I think you much more so than I, but still
I win that one.
We're both pretty introverted, but at the same time, like I don't like living completely alone. You know what I mean? I just like the noise of someone else.
I don't.
Well, you don't. Yeah, you really like living alone.
I really love it.
I'm too afraid to live by myself. And in this whole like writer's life, I mean, she lived like writer's life with a capital W, like writer's life, Yeah.
Because it was the only thing that she was going to let herself be. There wasn't an escape option. It was writer or nothing. No in between. No gray area there. Just writer or dead.
There's a difference between wanting to be someone who has sold a lot of books or who has name recognition or is famous or whatever for writing and someone who wants to write, the act of writing, and she really seems like someone who wanted to write. She had something to say. She had things that she wanted to explore.
And I think the impetus behind wanting to sell books, because that was in her notes of like, I'm going to sell this many books, wasn't just because she wanted a lot of money. She just wanted enough money to support herself with just writing. She didn't want to inspect another goddamn potato chip.
No more potato chips.
No more potato chips.
Yeah.
Only writing. So yeah, I think it was pretty pure, her love for her writing. Her writing was the love of her life.
Very inspirational, such a role model.
Yeah, she really is. So the next time you want to slack off, know that Octavia is watching and not approving.
Right. Right. Yeah, I wonder what it would have been like. I know she taught. I wonder what it would have been like to take a class from her. That would be cool.
Oh, yeah. Because she did. She taught at a lot of workshops and spread her Octavianness around to a lot of up-and-coming writers. So, yeah, I think we definitely missed out on that. Maybe we can find like a video online or something.
Yeah, there's got to be something.
Something.
She was the 90s. Someone camcorded the shit out of it.
Yeah, it's not going to be a good quality video, but it'll get the point across.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just interested in seeing kind of like her mannerisms and hearing her voice, seeing how she moved. And like, as someone who's a hermit and like an introvert, some people still do assume that if you're that type of person, that maybe you're like soft-spoken or shy. I don't get that vibe at all from her.
Yeah, I will link to a few interviews in the show notes. She has a very deep presence, a deep voice. She's just got this commanding, powerful voice. Very direct in her speech. I don't think she talked with her hands a lot, if I'm remembering correctly. She didn't need to put a flourish on it. What she said was important enough, and she knew that. And she didn't have to wave her hands around to get the point across.
Fair. For anyone interested, there's a lot out there on Octavia.
We'll link to everything that we can.
Just shouting out another podcast, one of the ones that you mentioned and that will be in the show notes, called Octavia's Parables. So, keep the podcast going. Yeah.
Keep it going. Keep listening. Keep learning. Keep reading. Keep reading Octavia. Keep reading other women of color or watching their movies.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there are even that many women sci-fi writers. So like she just ticks so many boxes in terms of like ways to broaden your horizons, people.
Yeah. I'm so glad that she was a spinster, because then we got to talk about her.
She's someone that I didn't know hardly anything about. So this is it's been good.
This has been great.
Yeah. So that's Octavia. You know what we do next, Amy?
I know what we do next. We've talked about Octavia for a while, so we're going to talk about us.
Of course.
Because we're attention hogs. I have to ask the question, Eva, why aren't you married?
Amy. Oh, why aren't I married? I think one of the reasons is I've always felt like my greater commitment or my greater purpose for me has not included marriage and children. It doesn't mean that I won't ever do those things. It's just, I mean, it might, because I'm getting old, but also just for me, it's important that I'm productive and that I contribute in a way that is related to like creativity. I wish I was more like Octavia in that way, where, writing was the love of her life and she was so dedicated and so driven. And I wish I had a little more of that, but I have enough of it that it really is, still the driving force in my life. Writing is still the thing that I most think about, the thing that makes me feel most guilty, the thing that makes me most happy, the thing that makes me most sad. And I've been in relationships before where that can be hard for a partner, unless they're kind of the same type of person. I don't know. Maybe I just date needy people. Maybe I'm just someone who is not very good at giving up my time, because when I look at my time, I look at it as time I'm writing or time I'm not writing, Unfortunately, this year, it's mostly been time I'm not writing, but the time I'm not writing, I'm usually thinking about how I'm not writing and feeling bad. So I should get some points for that. Maybe, but yeah, I mean, It is that thing where, once you're married and especially once you have children, your priorities shift. And I just have never been interested in shifting my priorities until and unless, I find someone who can kind of work with that. Then, single I shall be. And Amy.
Single life for me.
The single life for me. And Amy, which, by the way, they're doing a live action Pinocchio, which I'm like so worried about.
Yeah.
Because isn't that song from that?
Oh, yeah, it is. That's it.
Yeah.
You got there faster than I did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah,
you were singing it. But yeah, it's from Pinocchio.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're doing a live action Pinocchio. It's just, I'm already terrified.
Yep.
I'm like, is it going to be like as bad as Cats? Like, what are we looking at?
Yeah, puppets are already creepy. They don't.
Yeah, exactly. Just like we're good. So Amy, why aren't you married?
You know what? I'm going to piggyback off of what you said. Just, I ain't got time for that. When I think about all of the time and energy that I used to dedicate to being on the app, taking pictures for the app. You did that with me a bunch of times. You took a bunch of pictures of me to put on dating apps, putting on makeup, getting ready, going on dates, getting shit-faced, recovering from being shit-faced, spending time with dumb guys that I regret immensely. Like, I just ain't got time for that. This year I've been, doing a lot more of my own projects, and it feels real good. Like, I don't ever remember feeling this good when I was dating.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I ain't got time for that.
Just like hanging out with a guy you're dating casually, right? It's still like a process.
Right. It's still time that you have to invest.
Getting ready is like an hour and a half ordeal, Whereas if I was just staying at home, that would be cut out.
Yeah. None of that would happen. None of that would have to happen.
But, and again, that might just all be like societal pressures that I've internalized, but it is a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's just a lot.
Yeah, and I think, if it's someone that you really like and you really want a future with, it's worth the time investment, but you can also still be aware of the time that you're putting in and kind of want to do other things. Like, I think that's, a fair way to feel.
I mean, it's just the time investment in general.
Yeah.
And if you're living with someone, it's just like, well, then it's like, what are we going to eat? And like, whereas, like, if it's me, I'm like, I don't know, I'm going to eat this cold chicken and I'm fine with it. Like, it's just...
Yeah, I'm going to eat some crackers over the sink and I'm fine with that.
Yeah, exactly. And then you don't even have to clean. See, you're right? You're already being efficient about it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I hear you.
We've made our choices, and I don't think we've made the worst choices.
No. I'm relatively happy. I mean, I do question all of my life choices every second of every day, but I'm still relatively okay.
Yeah. I like to describe it as I'm not the most miserable that I've ever been in my life.
Yes, and that's exactly.
Yeah. And that's all you can ask of me.
That's all you can ask of me also.
I mean, and that's probably another reason that we're not married is because of our attitudes are just too fucking cheerful. We're just too cheerful. We put people off with their cheerfulness.
Oh, God. The joy I exude.
Yes. And speaking of some of the things that I've been working on, I have some announcements of things that I want to do with the podcast. 2 things, actually. So first, a dating challenge. Not that I am dating right now, but when I was dating, there were so many pieces of dating advice that I thought were like gospel. And I look at them now and I'm like, no, I don't think any of that's right. So I want to do a social media challenge where we put up a piece of standard dating advice and we challenge that. We describe how that's wrong and what we're going to do to dismantle that oppressive piece of advice.
And I love that. I mean, I feel like I have those same things in my head. And then every time I abide by one of them, I'm constantly questioning it, but I'm also too fearful to not abide by it.
Yeah.
So,
right?
Is
and
kind of
what's the worst thing that's going to happen if we don't? Like, if we do talk about politics on the first date, what's the worst that's going to happen?
Yeah. It kind of gets in your head. You're like, there shouldn't be a game. I shouldn't be playing the game of what are all these rules and do they actually matter? And all these things. What if if I don't follow them, then this person is not going to have any interest in me whatsoever. So it's very fear-based. Yeah, I'm just interested to see like what people out there think of them. I feel like we just kind of accept them and don't necessarily talk about them that much. It's a tire fire out there, people.
Right. So we'll be on Instagram talking about this here and there and everywhere. We will be launching a Spinster book club later in the year. Still working out the exact logistics of how and when this will happen. But each month we will read a book about a spinster, by a spinster, just even women's history, gender roles, things like that. Things that affect women. Things affect a woman. They're going to affect a single woman as well, most likely. So, we will announce that as well when we pick the first book, and we'll tell you how to sign up for the discussion. And I'm pretty excited about that one.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll actually read some of the copious amount of books that I purchased over the last, what month are we in? We're in January?
Yeah.
So like 9 or 10 months. Yeah, I had so many hopes and dreams when it came to reading. It just is not panned out. Make me read a book, Amy. Make me do it.
I will make you read a book. And it will be a good book, and you will get something out of it.
All right.
So yeah, that's those are my announcements. Looking forward to it. We have come to the end of our time together today.
You sound like Mr. Rogers.
That's great. I want to sound like Mr. Rogers.
As you should.
Won't you be my neighbor?
You guys know to follow us on social media at Spinster Life Podcast, and go to our website, spinsterlife.com, where you can subscribe to our newsletter and hear about new episodes.
Thank you very much for listening.
Bye.